Hi everyone, welcome. Just setting up here, and Caroline should be joining us shortly. Um, just make sure to spell everyone's names right. Here we go. Hi, nice to see you all here. This is great. Just gonna give everyone a second to arrive. Here we go. Caroline in here. Perfect. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, how are
Welcome
you?
back. I'm good. How
Yeah,
about you?
yeah, good.
Good. I had to turn the lights on in my office because it got so stormy. I realized halfway through the other video it was like being in a dark, shadowy lair.
Yeah, very fall weather right now.
Yeah, it was so nice this morning. And then, did you see all that fog that rolled in the other day too? It
hmm
was good, good and creepy.
So I
Uh,
hope there's no feedback this time.
yeah, it sounds a little bit better. It was mostly happening when I was talking, so
Okay.
it seems better already. Yeah, and apologies to anyone who tuned in, and we're still getting a bit. So if you
I'll
turned
turn
down the
my volume
volume,
down. Yeah.
yeah, let's try that. Great. Oh yeah, okay, that's definitely better. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Great. So I guess we can get started here and just thanks everyone who's tuning in and joining us here. Um, my name is Nicole Burisch. I'm the Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the National Gallery of Canada. And I'm here today with Caroline as part of House Blends, a series of online chats that NGC curators have been doing with invited guests. We've been talking with some of our colleagues at the museum and other folks outside the museum, and now kind of reaching out to talk to people in the broader artistic community across the country and around the world. And I'm so honored and happy to be here today with artist Caroline Monnet, who's originally from Gatineau, Ottawa-Gatineau region, from Elmer, you said, and now mostly based in Montreal, but still sometimes visiting the region. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you for the invitation. Yes.
Yeah. So to start us off, we are here in this virtual space together. I'd still like to recognize that we are on the land and in the real space too. And in this case, we're both tuning in from the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, who have been custodians of the land and water here for a very long, long time. And I feel very grateful to be here in this place with you. And just to note quickly that the conversation we're having today is a continuation of the last episodes that you may have tuned in with my colleagues Jonathan Shaughnessy and Christine Lalonde to kind of mark and honor the closing of the exhibition Badakone, Continuous Fire for Continuel. And as folks probably know, this is a major survey of Indigenous art from around the world that just closed on October 4th, and that featured works by more than 70 contemporary Indigenous artists, identifying with almost 40 Indigenous nations, ethnicities, and tribal affiliations from 16 countries, including the country known as Canada. And also including work by Caroline, whose amazing work was included in the exhibition, a fantastic installation that we'll be talking about today in a minute. But to start off, Caroline, I'd love to just hear a bit from you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, your influence, background, all this kind of stuff. You have, I think, just a really quite diverse and rich and interesting practice. So I'd love to hear some about you.
Well, like you said, I grew up in Gatineau before it was called Elmer, a small town closer to Hall, where the National Art Gallery is. My mother is a member of the Kitigan-Zibi First Nation, which is about 2 hours north of Ottawa, and my father is from France. So I also grew up partly in Brittany, France. So I guess that being between two cultures, or that duality, really has influenced the work that I've been doing in the past couple of years. Just because I've always been interested in this idea of borders or frontiers or those gray zones, also pushing down labels and boxes. Because I grew up also on the Quebec side, but went to school on the Ontario side. So was crossing that border every day. Grew up Francophone, but my mother's family was Anglophone. So always having kind of a foot between two worlds and not really belonging in one place. So I think that's why today I touch multiple disciplines. I studied sociology and communications. So I thought I wanted to be a journalist until I realized it wasn't for me. I needed more time to find a way to express myself. I started making video and movies. I also work in cinema. Started making films in 2009 with mostly experimental short films, and slowly started experimenting more with video installation because I was frustrated with the traditional passive cinema experience. I wanted people to move into the space and have a more physical experience with the work. Kind of how gradually I migrated into working within gallery spaces and working with sculptures and photography and installations. What else can I say? I mean, I think the social science background has really informed my practice as well. I see sociologists a little bit like artists. We respond to the world around us, and it's about giving some critical thinking about the issues of society and the world around us, and offering maybe a dialogue through the work that we do. So I do think it informs a lot. I'm interested in a lot of sociology research, and that's how I work. Usually I do a lot of research, and then try to find the most simple way to express it through visual arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this. I really like this idea that your kind of sociological, or that sort of training in sociology would allow you to kind of bring this, kind of critical reflection in the topics you're addressing, and sort of how you're looking at the world. And again, like you said, these feelings of being in between, or your experiences of moving between, kind of gray zones, that a kind of sociology frame is sort of not unlike an artistic frame in sort of looking and considering and reconsidering how the world is. And I think that absolutely shows up in your work in really interesting ways. So to move from there, let's talk a bit about the work in badakone, and I'm gonna pull up an image and show that. Try to not show you pictures of like my dog instead or something. There you go. All right, there we go. So this is an image of the installation that you presented as part of badakone. That actually consists of two works: Transatlantic, a video projection, and Proximal, the series of sculptures that we see. And for me, this was a really kind of impactful work in the exhibition. One where I think, you were talking sort of about the immersive experience, and for me this really was one where I was really sort of aware of my body kind of moving through the space, and sort of being on this almost like a voyage through the space, which I know is also what the work itself is about, like a voyage that you took. So for me, there was a real nice kind of yeah, coherence in that, and that embodied experience of the installation. So perhaps you
Yes.
could talk a bit about the work and how it came about.
Yes, well, I think the immersive aspect comes from the large scale projection. It's about 30. I'm not sure how big it is in the space there, but it's pretty large. It's 30 meters, 30 feet wide. It's pretty long, and it was actually shot in 2012, where I took a trip across the Atlantic Ocean by cargo boat and filmed the journey with a mini DV handheld camera. And I left Europe from the port of IJmuiden, which is close to Amsterdam, and then all the way to Montreal, going through the St. Lawrence River. And actually, I had to take off in Cleveland, but I didn't keep that part in the video. But it was interesting to see the journey for transporting steel from Scandinavian countries in order to make cars in America, for cars that would later be brought back to Europe to be sold over there. So it was an interesting kind of economy journey and money exchange there that was happening. At first, when I decided to make the trip, the idea was, I was intrigued by the idea of that if if identity is intrinsic to territory, what happens when you come from two distinct territories, and in my case, Brittany, France, and Outaouais, Quebec. I feel very, very much Anishinaabe and felt very much French. So I was trying to find a way to define that identity, and the Atlantic Ocean became a middle ground for both sides of my ancestors to meet. And then I realized it was much more than that. The Atlantic Ocean is 1/5 of the surface of the earth. It has this symbolic meaning for obviously the colonial route, but also a lot of mythologies are attached to it. It brought wars, it brought migrations, it brought hope, also people moving from one country to the next. It brought a lot of trauma as well, and colonial exchanges and economy exchanges. And so it became a real interesting symbolism to explore a lot of things. And the thing that I was mostly interested is the idea of communication across Great Divide, or rather lack of communication. I presented this work the first time at the Walter Phillips Gallery at the Banff Center for the Arts. And the exhibition was titled Like Ships in the Night. So meaning this kind of relationships that are that never actually came to fruition, or actually these lost relationship that could have been something very beautiful, but in the end became quite conflicted, or there was just this lack of communication. So the video is a 16-minute video that shows a little bit all the emotions I went through throughout the 22 journey trip at sea.
22 days, yeah.
22 days, wait, sorry. And so it came from anxiety to boredom to calmness to fear as well, because I was the only woman on ship, so there was a level of anxiety that came with that. Also very industrial landscape. And then sometimes when we were in the middle of a giant storm with waves of 40 meters high, I started, praying for the first time, and kind of got that real fear of losing my life, basically, in the middle of nowhere with no one knowing where I was. And then sometimes just really at peace, because the Atlantic Ocean is so beautiful, and you start losing all notions of markers or references to the horizon. It just becomes this line that separates the earth and the sky. And it's changing, but it's the same. It's a very weird feeling. So the movie, it tries to encapsulate all that into 16 minutes. It's also a very abstracted film, so it's quite meditative. I want people to enter the space and feel the installation as a sensorial immersive experience. And then when they start knowing about the work, they start looking at all the layers and symbolism and meaning that is embedded in the research and the work. But at first, sometimes there's moments where it resembles those psychology tests or ink blocks. So people can see whatever they want, and it taps into a kind of a collective unconsciousness. And people can take whatever they need or they want and see whatever they need and want from that installation. Yeah. So it took me quite a few years from 2012 to it was shown for the first time in 2018. So the mini DVD tapes were left on my shelf for quite some years before I took them out and decided to do something with it. And I'm glad I waited that long, because I think how it started at the beginning, the intentions behind the project at the root of it was much more interesting, with a bit more maturity and a little bit more critical thinking to what it actually means to cross the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I love this idea of the ocean as as a sort of communication, like a means of communication, that it's a place you can be, like it's its own site, but it's also something you can move through, or information can move through, or people or capital, like you said, or goods and services, that it's sort of a place of it is a place, but it's also a conduit. That kind of sense of displacement or of movement, I think, is really present in the video as well, of sort of, yeah, of this moving through. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit too about the works. Oh, this is a better picture. Great. So the sculptural elements, I have two of them. The sculptural elements that we see in the space alongside the video.
Yes, the sculptures are titled Proximal, so it means that any given point on the sphere is not further away or closer to the center. So it talks about unity. It also talks about equality. These are, for me, they're markers of space. They're inspired by, in Brittany, France, we have rocks alignments that most people know more like Stonehenge. And they were traditionally put where the electricity currents cross under the earth. So they were very particular markers on the earth, and very sacred, and very helped a lot in knowing also about the movements of the seasons and the sun. And I was really intrigued by them. They become it grounds the work into something more earthy, compared to, being lost at sea in the middle of nowhere with no references. And also, it's the reference that at sea, of course, you've got the radio waves to help you navigate, but also you need to take in consideration, and sometimes it's more accurate to follow the sun, the moon, and the stars. So that's why they're there. They're also made out of concrete. They're handmade with concrete. And for me, I've always been interested in construction materials, industrial materials, and how to bring poetry back into them, man-built materials. And because I was starting my journey in a very industrial landscape in IJmuiden, it felt normal to have that present in the installation. It's very present in the video as well. I mean, the movie starts leaving industrial grounds to going into a very poetic, beautiful, serene landscape of the sea, and then finishing back into that industrial landscape. So basically what is connecting our nations and our countries become these industrial grounds. So I was interested into that. And and those plinths represent the tectonic plates that are present in the Atlantic Ocean. And like you said, it's meant to mark the space. So you're obligated to move in a certain way within the space. You gravitate around them, and
or
that
orbit
was
almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and hopefully people go into the installation and they can spend the time there, the 16 minutes, and they just start like going into a different consciousness. They can lose themselves in the work, and it's made to be that way. The mirroring effect of the video makes it quite abstract, and with the soundscape as well. Soundscape is made by sound artist Simon Guibard, and he did a beautiful soundtrack. I don't know, he has this ability of opening up space with this music. He's the only one I know that can do that. And he used Morse codes and radio waves. And I told them a little bit about colors. And so we had really specific cues to compose the music. And I was really happy with it.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's such a major, I wish we tried to show the video, it didn't work. I wish we could have shared it because the video has, as you said, these really, oh, I think she's frozen for a minute. Hope she comes back. Still there.
Oh, I'm not frozen, on my way. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was going to say the video has the sound element is has this real sort of emotional quality to it, like you said, of capturing these different phases of the journey, of feeling bored or feeling afraid, and it sort of starts with this almost kind of looming anticipatory feeling. It's not unpleasant, but you're sort of brought along in that kind of experience through sound as well, in a really powerful way, I think.
I strongly believe that in moving images work, well, in my case anyway, the way I like to work is that sound is almost 50% of the work. I put a lot of attention and details into creating space for the sound, and they really need to match the images and really be in tune with the intentions that I'm aiming for with the visuals. And for me, that's why I love video making so much. It uses all the sensories, all your senses, and it has photography, music, performance, rhythm. You know, there's such a, and the soundtrack really helps with rhythm, and when it works, it's powerful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We also wanted to mention that Crystal Migwan, who's a curator who worked here for a bit during the preparation for this exhibition, wrote just a fantastic article about this work and about this installation for the NGC magazine. So I would certainly encourage everyone to go check that out, because it's just great, and her writing is so beautiful.
I agree. She wrote a fantastic piece. I couldn't be happier with that piece. It's very, very, very well done.
Yeah, and also to mention that this work is actually now in the collection of the National Gallery of Canada. It's been acquired, and that we're so lucky to have it here. I hope, I know it's just come down, but hopefully we'll get to put it up on display again sooner rather than later.
Yes, for sure. And that was such an exciting news when the National Art Gallery, decided to acquire the work. It's such a prominent institution, and now the work's going to travel to Frankfurt in Germany. Thanks to this exhibition, the Frankfurt director saw the show there and invited the work to travel. So that's really, it's really great news.
Yeah, congrats. That's amazing. So on the topic of the exhibition, I also wanted to hear, I guess, a bit about your experience of being in the exhibition, and what it means for you in your practice to kind of have that situated within this context of global contemporary Indigenous art.
Well, for sure that some of the artists included in the exhibition, I've been following their practice for many years already. I've been following their work, and I have so much respect for what they do, the work that they do, and to have my work in dialogue with them in the same space is already incredible. And when it's on that scale, it's even more incredible. I think what's being done these days in terms of Indigenous contemporary art is really, really exciting, and it's forward-thinking. It's always, it feels that it's always rooted in a social, political context filled with activism, and I believe that that's the responsibility of an artist, to have something to say. And to be included on that platform means that maybe I also have something to say, and that my work can be relevant in a global context and in a contemporary context. So I was super honored to be included, definitely. Also, it was the first time that my family could come and see my work in person. I brought my grandfather, and it was quite an emotional moment for me, and for him, I think. So yeah, I was really proud about that. Yeah, and I think it's something you never dream of until it really happens, and you have to pinch yourself and go, yeah, it's really there, you know, it's really happening. And we were talking about the first edition of Id Sakahan, and I remember at that time how I felt, how fundamental it was for what's to come, and it felt like a stepping stone into something bigger. And the artists that were included in the exhibition already, I was so amazed by their work and amazed by what they were doing already. And yeah, just inspired. It's so energizing and empowering to see these connections being made on a global scale, and to connect communities and nations this way. I think it's very important work, and to be able to show all of these works on a, you know, to big audiences like this, and be showcased on a more prominent level than what we're used to, is very formidable, I think.
I think so too. Yeah. And like you, I think I remember clearly going to see Sakahan. Yeah, I think it was 8 years ago, and that being a really kind of transformative experience for me too, and thinking about how Indigenous art practices functioned not just in Canada, or existed, and sort of relationships between those in a kind of global context. And I think, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next. And like you said, they're very sort of forward-looking projects to kind of continue that work.
Yeah, and I think we've proven that it's relevant and people want more. Did you see the amount of people at the opening, and
Yes.
people passing through and coming to see the exhibition? The response has been immense and has been super positive, and I think people are just demanding more. Artists, Indigenous artists working today are doing fantastic work, and they're super critical. They're super rooted in you know, in looking into the past, but giving a perspective into the future. So they're highly relevant and highly contemporary. And I think that's what this exhibition has proven to be.
Yeah, I would agree. And on that note, I was wondering too if I'm just going to switch back here for a second. I'm wondering if there are any works or other artists in badakone that really stood out for you, or that you felt a connection with.
Yeah, it's a hard question, because obviously there's so many great, powerful, strong work in the show, and really great jobs from the curators. But I really love, like, one of the most stunning work that I saw in the exhibition was the Aka by Mata Aho collective, the women that weave these ropes into the upstairs lobby.
Yeah, in the basement here.
I think that's where it is, right? And I love how they're exploring knowledge through weaving and through labor. The idea of very detailed work that is embedded. You know, it's kind of knowledge from generations embedded into this fabric and this weaving of the ropes, and using ropes as an element. Maybe also I feel deeply connected to ropes, and because in Brittany I was always on boats, and, you know, sailboats, and using ropes, and it's very, like, a very strong material that's present there. But to use it as a language, to create those knots, I think that's very powerful. It's very labor intensive, and just there's so much power in this collective working together to create this giant, massive piece.
Yeah.
One other work that I absolutely love is the Zanelli Moholi work, and how she uses photography to create space for for women of, you know, minorities, to challenge the stories, the narrative, challenge stereotypical images and change those preconceptions. So those are things that I try to bring into my own work. So yeah, I was inspired by these two works.
Yeah, those are both standouts for me too. Anything with weaving usually gets me pretty excited. Um, I'm thinking too about you sort of talked about this idea of using sort of having traditional knowledge and then bringing it forward through the rope or through kind of contemporary materials. And I think that's a nice segue to mention this recent series that you've been working on, Our Value, and I'm going to show some quick image from that, where you're using these motifs that have been passed down to you and rendering them in these construction materials to talk about housing, sort of housing situations and housing crisis for First Nations communities. So could you talk a little bit more about these patterns? I think these have always been some of my favorite of your works.
Yeah, I've been obsessed with these patterns for a couple of years now. I use them. I mean, they're inspired by traditional Anishinaabe designs, but they were given to me by June Spence, very important woman in my life. And when she passed away, it was kind of a way to mourn and to just feel connected to her. But then as more I was doing, I started creating my own language through them and putting them on the computer, rendering them on the computer, and then really playing with them. They started resembling to barcodes, to city maps, QR codes, almost, you know, this type of language that I was creating, microchips, very futuristic language. But they reminded me also of the birch bark biting technique, where you fold birch bark in a very tiny piece and you start biting it to create designs. And then when you open it up, it creates this very symmetrical, beautiful, intricate design. And so I was kind of merging these techniques and this knowledge and learning through them at the same time to create my own language. And I started weaving them onto Tyvek, so construction material for isolation, and then laser etching them onto these isolating materials, styrofoam, using thermal bubble wrap, so anything that would be used in construction. And to talk about the lack of vision from the Canadian government for, you know, the housing crisis in northern communities. I like the idea of using work to talk about something, to bring light onto, you know, the issues that are close to my heart and that I feel deserve more attention. Using isolation materials was a way of talking about the physical isolation, yes, but also a metaphorical isolation. We're talking again about this divide between nations and divide of understanding. And maybe it goes back to the transatlantic video where, you know, I was talking about communication across Great Divide, but here I'm still talking about this kind of ditch or kind of hole that exists sometimes between communities and understanding other nations. Well, mostly Indigenous and non-Indigenous, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
yeah.
Here, I'll show another one while we're talking, to just show the kind of range of materials that you're working with here. And the way you're talking about, I think it's occurring to me too that in French the word is it's insulation is isolation,
Yes.
but that there's a nice, and the insulation and isolation, like there's an interesting play that happens as we move between these languages again, that isolation and separation is part of it, and then insulation, which can be both protecting but also about like buffering or keeping things out or keeping things away. So I think that the way that these works do that too, and sort of cover, like they're covered with this pattern that's really important to you, and yeah, something about, there's a protective element in the surfaces and in the materials.
Yeah, and I think also looking at them, for me, it's a type of language, and there's knowledge that is embedded into that language, and it's how to carry that forward as well, and how can that be, you know, put in my current urban reality at the same time. The show was titled R Value, and the R stands for the degree of insulating degree that has within the material. So it's a very technical construction term, but our value is also a play on word, talking about our values, right? Our common values. So I always like to play a little bit about the symbolism, and I like when the work has multiple layers. When you look at it, you don't necessarily know what it's about. You have a first reaction to it, and then when you start reading about the work, you see that there's much more research behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I love this connection that you made to the birch bark writing, which I also just is such a incredible practice, and that process of folding and unfolding, which shows up in these in the kind of symmetry, that they kind of have this mirrored aspect that we also see in the video in Transatlantic, like the kind of doubling and multiplying that happens as something unfolds, which I think is just great too.
Yeah, I love symmetry. Obviously, I like things in order and geometry and architecture. I'm really passionate about architecture and building materials and how city maps are made. I'm just really obsessed by those patterns and the repetition of those patterns. What do they create in the long run? And trying to establish my own language with it within that thing. And so it's an ongoing exploration, I would say.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. Now I think we are getting on to 3:30. I'm going to switch back to this view. And I did want to just ask and check in if anyone has any questions from our lovely viewers. You're welcome to put those in the comment section, and we can answer a few questions here if people have any of those.
I love questions.
We like questions, yeah. People are sending congratulations and waves, and they're laughing at our cheesy jokes, it mostly looks like, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Maybe while we're waiting, I'll ask you one more question, which is what are you working on now, and what's next for you?
So right now I'm mostly working towards a solo exhibition at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, which is going to be a continuation of the last exhibition. So continuing exploring building materials, working with some architects and some engineers to find new models of building or to offer dialogue, new ways of constructing that might be more adequate to communities in the north, or to go back to more traditional building ways. It's all in the development phase right now and still exploring, but I want to push that direction. I want to see where it leads me. I don't feel like I've made the most of it yet. And in parallel, I'm still working on finishing my first feature film. I shot before last year, right before the holidays, I shot the film. So now we're in post-production and hopefully, finishing it for 2021. We don't know where the world will lead us these days. So it's all a bit, one day at a time.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this. That's a huge project. Okay, we have some questions rolling in. Someone asked about the size of that last piece, maybe of the works from R Value that I had put up, the two-dimensional ones. Do you know? I think I have your website open here, but maybe you know off the top of your head.
So the blue piece is 8 feet by 5 feet, so 8 feet long by 5 feet high, and the smaller thermal bubble wraps. They're 24 by 24 inches, so they're smaller works. I like to work large scale in general, but the embroidery machine sometimes has to put me some, rules that I can't, depending on the material, depending on the machine, I have to adapt the work according to the tools I'm using. And I love that. That's why I love working with concrete so much, is that there's a level of uncertainty that comes with it. You can't really control water or fire. So when I work with cement and I work with water, then don't really know what's going to come out. And I did these pyro, like a laser etch pyro etching. So using fire to burnt wood. And again, you don't really control that. And I love being able to work with the material and having those constraints and adapt with it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great segue for, I think, another question in terms of talking about medium and material and all that kind of stuff. Someone has asked if you worked with if you plan to work with virtual reality or video or immersive art. Is that something you've looked at all?
Well, it's a medium I've never really tried yet, but I just, for Nuit Blanche, just recently, Nuit Blanche in Toronto, they asked me to convert the transatlantic video into VR 360 experience. So that was kind of the first time that I had the first approach with it, that my work would be, put in that rendition. But I'm totally intrigued by it because I'm very interested in working with space and spatiality, and I love the mise en scène behind it and being able to work with that. So, and I mean, I don't know why, but I've been on juries, international film festival juries for their VR section. So there's something that might be calling me somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I would love to see. That would be very curious to see. Go there. That's great. Someone is also just asking about, I think some things that we covered in the beginning of the discussion. So I will mention that this video will be uploaded to. Sorry, it's my dog barking in the background. The video will be uploaded onto the gallery's Instagram channel. So if you want to go back and listen to the conversation, you can do that, and also in French on the gallery's French channel. So yeah, there's lots to discover here. Yeah, and I think, and someone has asked if the exhibition is open. So the exhibition just closed on October 4th. But maybe, yeah, I think it's important to note that, sorry about the dog, if the exhibition is closed,
Really funny.
sorry, I gave him a treat and made him calm before he still dies, like upset. There's lots of information on the gallery's website. So there's images of the work and interviews with artists and a catalog coming out very, very soon. So I would encourage you all to stay tuned for that, because there's just such rich content around this exhibition. So lots more to discover. Yeah, and maybe I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up, or just at the end of everything. But Caroline, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me here today and taking the time to ask all these questions and answer questions and sharing with us about your work. It's been a total pleasure.
It's been my pleasure, really.
I hope we can do another one again soon. Yeah, and thanks everyone else who tuned in. And like I said, please, I think we'll have another chat in another couple of weeks. And please do check out the website for more information about the show.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. See you later. Bye.